Warning, this episode contains subject matters related to suicide, murder, and child loss. Viewer discretion is advised. Just a few kilometers southeast of the small city of Dumbarton, Scotland, lies a small estate hidden away among the trees and hills, which holds a dark history of a staggering amount of attempted suicides over the past 70 years. Locals typically try their best to avoid the area with certain members of their families, as only a few seem to be vulnerable to what's been haunting the area. Join me as we delve into the mystery of Overtoun Bridge, also known as the Dog Suicide Bridge. Welcome everyone to the pilot episode of Moonlight Lore. I'm your host, Jordan Hopkins. Today we'll be talking about the suicides happening on the Overtoun Bridge that have been going on since the 1950s. The suicides of this bridge are unique in the fact that only dogs seem to be the ones leaping from the bridge, seemingly trying to die from the fall. Claims of over 300 to 600 dogs have apparently leapt off the bridge in an attempt to kill themselves, raising the questions everywhere around the world. What is tempting and luring these dogs off the bridge? And is it even possible for dogs to even contemplate their own deaths and to go so far as to try and end their own lives? A man by the name of Dr. David Sands, an expert on canine psychology, was brought in to investigate what might be the leading cause of dogs leaping to their deaths. He brought along his own canine companion, an old dog named Hendrix, who had jumped off the bridge a number of years before, seemingly trying to kill itself. Dr. Sands wanted to see if being back at the bridge would trigger any emotions or reactions for Hendrix. Hendrix did have some small reactions to being back on the spot she nearly perished. She tensed up, giving Dr. Sands a clue that she did indeed remember where she was, and Dr. Sands decided to run a number of tests and experiments to try and narrow down what might be the cause. Dr. Sands, being a man of science, had a hunch that he could find a scientific explanation for the strange happenings at the bridge. He had a sneaking suspicion the local wildlife might be the ones to blame. He brought in a number of rodents found in the wooded area and exposed them to his dog Hendrix. Sands then laid out scent samples of mice, squirrels, and mink in front of the dog to see which one she would be most curious in going after. She chose the mink every time. Dr. Sands then brought in 10 more dogs to test his theory, and 70% of them went towards the mink, giving Dr. Sands the information he was looking for. He figured the mink, a small weasel-like rodent, was most likely the culprit for the dogs leaping to their deaths. To better understand why Dr. Sands believed the mink was the strongest cause for the deaths, we need to take a look into the history of the nearby city of Dumbarton and the features and habits of the mink itself. Dumbarton is located on the edge of River Clyde, a small river which leads out into the Atlantic Ocean, giving Dumbarton the access and the means to have their own port for shipbuilding and transporting goods. Some of these goods brought into the port of Dumbarton were minks, brought over from America for the strict use of fur farming. When the first mink was brought over in 1938 for farming, laws were put in place to care and look after these invasive creatures. Unfortunately, as things typically go, people get complacent, and after some time, minks either escaped from their farms or were set loose by the fur farmers who needed to get rid of some of their stock. The American mink would then run wild in the Scottish wilderness, becoming an invasive species, taking over much of the landscape and killing other small creatures in the process. Knowing when the mink was first brought over to Scotland, possibly to the shipping ports of Dumbarton. It would mean the mink was introduced to the Overtoun Estate area just 12 years before the first dogs leapt from the bridge to their deaths. During that time, many people believed minks in the area could have gotten loose or have been let loose and migrated away from the fur farms to around the wooded area of Overtoun Bridge. Adding more weight to the mink theory, we can look at what makes them such a troublesome creature for the area. During the hot, dry days of summer, the oils in the mink's fur gives off an overwhelming scent that becomes irresistible to a dog's strong sense of smell. Hunting dogs from both Scotland and America have trouble searching for their prey when a mink has been in the area, leading the dogs away from their hunt and into a search for the mink itself. It's said for the majority of these cases of dogs leaping from the bridge, it's always been a hot, sunny, dry day, and it has typically been larger breeds of dogs who have longer noses, perfect for smelling out wild game in the wooded areas. Surrounding the estate is a small forest, providing flowing streams, hills to burrow into, and foliage to run around in, and plenty of other creatures like mice and frogs for the mink to eat. These features of the area around the estate provide the mink ample space and comfort to live, with the main feature of flowing water being found right underneath the bridge itself. Minks typically try to nest near water, so with this fact being the case, most people, including Dr. Sands, conclude that the mink is the most probable cause for the dogs leaping off the bridge, searching for the source of the mink scent. Dr. Sands also adds, with the sound of the wind in the trees, the water flowing down beneath the bridge, the many different smells, and the fact that dogs are partially colorblind, the dogs may look around while they're on the bridge, and they may get confused and not realize there is a drop on the other side of the wall of the bridge, and they may leap over by mistake and not on purpose to try and kill themselves. Another theory a lot of people believe is the estate was built on a thin place, a location where the curtain between our world and the spirit world is thinnest, which allows spirits and tricky creatures to cross over and lead dogs off the bridge to their deaths. This theory is given strength for the fact for years dogs have been thought to have a connection to ghosts and spirits, being able to hear, see, and smell better than humans. Dogs have been common companions for ghost hunting teams who go out searching in thin places for spirits and ghosts. The Overtoun Bridge has been considered a thin place for decades from people all over the world, and there may be some credence to this theory if you're willing to look more on the supernatural side of things. Scotland is home to thousands of stories of the supernatural. For centuries, there have been tales of giants, elves, gnomes, ghosts, and nearly any other creature one could think of. If the grounds of the estate was built on this thin place, being in a wooded area full of hills, close to water, spirits of those who came before may still be haunting the woods and bridge. Trickster creatures such as elves, gnomes, little folk, or even fairies might also be the cause why dogs are leaping to their deaths. Since dogs are more sensitive to the supernatural, and they come to a thin place like Overtoun Bridge, could it be possible they might be seeing a ghost, or little folk, or fairy hovering above the bridge, which in turn, possibly, or even purposely, leading the dogs off the bridge to their deaths? With very little to no evidence of this being the case, most don't seem to believe this would be the cause of all these dogs dying. Although, there are plenty who refuse to believe a small rodent such as the mink could also cause this much death. Another incident involving a death of an innocent gives credence to the theory of something supernatural being at play here. In 1994, a family of 3 came to the estate to spend the day hiking in the surrounding woods. Kevin Moy was walking with his wife and holding their newborn baby boy as they approached the bridge. As the family started to walk across, Kevin shouted out that his son was the reincarnate of the devil, and he held out his young baby over the ramparts of the bridge and tossed the boy down to the rocky waters below. Kevin then climbed up on top of the ramparts, ready to throw himself over the edge too. Other hikers and travelers rushed over and, along with his wife, were able to pull him off the edge of the bridge and take him into the estate house. A few hikers went down to rescue the baby, but unfortunately they were not able to save his life, and the young boy died in the hospital a short while later. People argue this incident alone helps add weight to the theory of something supernatural going on at the bridge. Others argue this was just a case of a mentally ill man who unfortunately was not able to get the help he needed before committing something horrifying and unspeakable. If demons or spirits are at work here, they seem to only go after those with vulnerable minds. Dogs who have an innocent and curious mind, and a man who was mentally ill. And if this is the case, this makes Overtoun Bridge a very dangerous place. The Overtoun Bridge throughout the years have proven, with all the deaths and tragedies surrounding it, that it has become a very deadly destination for those who otherwise would be looking for a nice day of hiking in the woods. When I went there to see for myself if I could find anything supernatural or anything just natural, I sadly wasn't able to find any trace of any mink, and I did not feel anything supernatural pulling me towards the bridge. If it is the mink causing all this trouble, unintentionally luring hundreds of dogs to their deaths, or if it's something supernatural, possibly malicious, everyone who learns about this bridge will have to come to their own conclusion on what they think might be the answer to the mystery of Overtoun Bridge.